All right, in modern JavaScript or ECMAScript 6 or ES6, we have something called modules. And how do you build a module using the keyword exports? We'll see that here. So what really module really means? So it's a small piece of code which you intend to use again and again, and you put it in a separate file, and then you explicitly tell that I want to use it as module. So you export it, and then in the file, wherever you want to call that, you use the keyword import to import them. And it can be a variable, function, class, or set up variables, functions, or classes. So either way. So you can have a whole lot of things getting exported from a single file, or you can have one or more getting exported. So let's see a simple export option. So if I go back to my Visual Studio Code, and then inside that, if I start writing variable, simple variable in the message.js, which is basically in the same folder under app.js. So I say that let message equals to hello from ES6 module. Okay, fairly simple one. And then to use it outside of this file as module, we need to do one small thing is that we need to say export. That's it, done. And then in the app.js, what you need to do is that you need to say import and then say message, and then you define give the file name. Now in the file name, you may or may not have .js. If you don't say .js, it's also fine. It'll be considered as a JavaScript file. So no need to mention the file name. It's an optional thing. Now this is how you export it. Now, for example, you have more than one such messages. So you have this and then say message 2. You go to the app.js, you import message 2, and you get that. And to catch hold of these variable values, use anything. Let's use console.log, and you simply say message 2, and it will be printed for you in the message 2. Now you may have a function, right? So for example, you have a function called const func1 equals to an arrow function, a fat arrow, and a function, and which basically does a console.log. So let's say log and print hello from func1. Okay, and this function needs to be exported. So export. Okay, so you say that export, and it goes ahead and exports this function uh, to the outside world. You come over here, you say func1. Okay, now you see that I am getting all of them here, and I can basically call the function here using func1. That's all, and I'm fine. So I can either call it as a very name function or something like parameter if I need to pass parameter. So either way is fine. So you can actually see that I'm able to get hold of that. Now, one thing you can always do is that while you are doing this export import, you may have some other utility function which is not necessarily need not be part of this export import drama. So you say func2 equal to, let's you declare a const func2 equal to say hello, and it's not going to get exported, so you don't need to put an export over here. However, if you, let's say, have anything defined, you can also call export later point in time. So you can say export func2, and then you see that in this func2 is getting exported over here. Now you can also use a keyword called default func2. So what it means is that whenever You import this message.js, by default, the function will be um, imported and you'll be able to use it without explicitly mentioning. So you can also use this approach in terms of writing everything and then later point in time uh, exporting them with a name, right? So you can use the keyword default. You can also alias them, right? So for example, you have a name called message and you want to say txt. So you can say message as txt and it'll be aliased. If you want to bring in all of them, you can use the star thing. So you don't have to always say explicit names. You can always you have them, let's say um, one by one or all of them together. So for example, in this case, if I go ahead and try to bring in all of them here, I use star instead of this name. So if I have many thing coming in, so I just use this star keyword, and that should bring in all the functions for me from this module. So you basically get everything out of this, and all of them will be coming. So another thing I said explicit, so let me also write it down so that you remember it. So if you say that I have a message as error, so you get the error now. You can actually get hold of the error from here, and you get the error. Whatever you use in message will come as an error. So it's called aliasing of the export thing. So you can alias the export and then do it. Now, using the default, I already talked about. It's easier, so you will find a lot more usage in the context of React where we can actually default for a module that can be a variable, a function, or a class, right? So you can actually have define a function, mark it as export default, or later point in time, you can mark it as an export default and the function name. And then whenever you import, right, you don't need to specify the name of the function because the module represents the function name. So for example, if you, let's say, have a function called something like this, um, function test func, and then you write something inside this function, you leave it like that, and then you say, either you say here export, and then say default, and you go to the app and you say that message msg, okay, and then what happens that if you call this msg, it basically calls that function, right? So it is at the end of the day a function, right? So you basically can do not need to name that. You can just think of it like aliasing, right? So you give alias call message, but it will be calling this function because this is the default export, right? I may have other exports, but this is the default export. So you will find in the React this concept of having this curly braces while doing an import and non-curly braces. So that means these are whatever non-curly braces are the default export, and whatever inside the curly braces are sort of like a named export, right? So you can you can alter those behaviors based on how you want to write your module. So hope this was helpful, and thank you very much for watching. And this is very important concept.